Mr. Will G. What's up, dude?
What's going on, man? Thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Of course, bro. I'm pumped to have you. I uh I always really enjoy our talks, and so I'm excited for like this one because I've got you committed. It was a mistake of yours, but you committed to you have nothing the rest of the evening. So
No,
I'm just gonna get to pick your brain and keep you here for as long as I want, which is gonna be
I'm
awesome.
here till I hit shoulders, and I've got a full
Okay.
water bottle, so I can just yap as long as you want me to.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, dude, I'm excited to kind of jump into your story and kind of talk about what you do. But you have so many hats that you've worn. I think it's kind of similar to like if you look at Mike or if you look at me,
Yep.
we've been through kind of like every almost every phase of like the online versions of the fitness industry
Yeah.
and like touched all these different spots in different areas. So before we kind of get into your backstory, how would you describe yourself and what you do in one sentence? Like if you were talking to a stranger.
Yeah, I help coaches and trainers scale to a full-time income online with better systems and processes.
Love it. Love it. All right. We're going to dive into full time fit coach and everything. I want to start
Yeah.
out though with all the years that you spent in the fitness industry and competing and training people and now scaling fitness coaches' businesses. Um, you told me a story about a pediatrician when you were super young. So I want you to kind of tell that story and and start there.
Yeah, dude. I was like the skinniest of skinny kids. My pediatrician, his nickname for me was Styrofoam Boy because I
Nice.
would show up and I would get weighed, and I'm pretty sure from like the age of like 6 to 9, um, I hung at like 40 to 50 pounds. Like I remember like it being a big deal when I was like, I'm not 49 pounds anymore. I crossed over 50.
Yeah.
So I was about as small and as strangly and lanky as they come. So not having anyone else in my family really into fitness either, I was not set up to be a bodybuilder or really get into fitness at all. I was like the last person you'd expect.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you go from being that guy, right? Being the smaller kid, being lanky, being just like small boned, if you will.
Yeah.
How do you go from that to getting into hockey, which is like one of the most physical possible sports you can get into?
Yeah. So we would play we had a huge neighborhood kids group. So we would play all the sports. And I was so small, my parents literally told me that you cannot play football. They're like, we don't want the hospital bills. Like you will get destroyed. Every kid your age is like twice your size.
Mhm.
So we got around that was when you played street hockey, you couldn't really check people. So that was the game that I really got into. I was like, let's play street hockey, guys. Like my parents only play this one, like we play this other one. So we all, as a group, really got into street hockey. And after doing that for a little while, some of my friends started playing for ice hockey teams, and I wanted to. And again, my parents were really concerned, but they found a no contact league that I was able to start in, and I got really good playing roller hockey, and it translated well, and I was really good playing ice hockey. So eventually, I was able to convince my dad, hey, if I like put on 20 or 30 pounds, like, would you let me play in a contact league? And
Okay.
he was like, sure. And I'm sure he thought there's no way. Like, so I immediately went, I found like just online Googling stuff. I was like 12 or something at the time. And I found all these different things on like how to get big. I got P90X from like when that
Yep.
first came out. I did like that. I did it every day. I ran it like the 90 days, like 3 times in a row. And over the course of a year or so, I put on like 20, 30 pounds. I actually got kind of muscular. And that's what got me into it was necessity. Like I wanted to play this sport. It happened to be the one sport I was playing with all my buddies. And then I figured out really quickly, okay, I got to like figure out how to just become a bigger person, how to eat and how to like lift up weights. Cause I didn't even have weights at the time
Yeah.
to be able to play the thing I wanted to play. So kind of, it was born out of necessity.
Dude, I remember the P90X. I can't remember if my dad had it on VCR tape or if he had it on like Blu-ray, like DVD player. But I remember whenever I went to him with one of my little fitness kicks, I'm like, I want to get big, like I want to build muscle. And he would put it like we'd go out in the garage and there was like a super old TV out there that actually worked with whatever format he had. And we would put it on in there, and then I would get like halfway through the workout and be like, this sucks. Like I don't want to do this. And so that was like my first experience with workouts. And so that's why it took me probably like 5 or 6 years after trying P90X to be like, if you're going to the gym like that, that's what I thought everyone was doing. It was like
Yeah.
the high pace, like random, kind of like all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I stayed out of the gym for a long time because I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like that wasn't fun. And I didn't realize there was other types of fitness or lifting or bodybuilding even out there. I had no idea until I got to college, pretty much. Um,
Yeah, I was the same way. I had ridiculous endurance,
mhm.
because I didn't even the most weight I had was 10 pounds, and so when I wanted to go heavier, I would like stack the 5 and the 10 together and like grip it and like
Yep.
use that as like one. Um, but I remember I did all this training, and then when I got into high school and like the other guys on the team were lifting, I had all the endurance in the world and I could out rep anybody for just like going for distance.
Yeah.
But then like my bench press was like the bar because 45 pounds was like infinitely heavy to me at the time. I was like, I've just never lifted more than 15 pounds in a hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just a whole new game.
So you kind of got introduced to fitness during like while playing hockey.
Yeah.
You were really good at hockey though, right? You started to look at some schools and kind of like higher level play.
Yeah, I through high school because I got really, really into it, and I was homeschooled, didn't have a ton of friends, so like my free time was just getting good at this, and I got almost like a little like neurotically obsessed with like getting better. Like I was a weird kid. I
Yeah.
was like, I found a schedule in my basement because our family just moved, and so we were clearing out the old house. And I found these schedules when I was like 14, and it was like wake up 5 a.m., do this, eat this, do this, and like I've had like structured like days of like 2 a days, 3 days, like since I was, in my early teens.
Yeah.
Um, but it made me really good at the sport. I had no other distractions. Like my family was pretty religious, and then being homeschooled, I didn't have a large friend group. So like I didn't go out, I didn't do a lot of stuff. Like this was my one way to express myself.
Hmm.
Uh, and then I enjoyed being good at it too. So while everyone else was kind of like half doing this and half doing other things, I was just 100% on this. And I think that really was like formative for my mindset too, was I never had a point in life where like I had split focus. It was from a very early age. I was just like, oh, this is what I do 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's powerful. And the listeners will have heard me tell this story a couple of times, but I so I have this thing I call like the equation. Okay. And the equation is basically hard work and consistency over time equals results. And I talk about how I kind of made that first connection, I guess, like subconsciously for myself was I was all in on basketball. And so I decided my sophomore, junior, senior year of basketball that like I'm not doing any other sports. Like I'm gonna be the guy that shows up to the gym and goes and works out for 2 hours before school and has like a 5 to 7 a.m. gym workout like a basketball and worked on my skills and then went and got showered up and actually went to school and then I was staying after practice and everything like that. And like I really dedicated a ton of time and hours to getting better over the summers and everything. And so my play like elevated significantly as you would expect from doing that. And skills wise, I was elevating significantly. And I attribute a lot of what I've learned and a lot of the things that I've gone on to kind of like get obsessed with or do or accomplish, if you want to say accomplish, to understanding or making that subconscious connection while playing basketball, high school basketball, that just committing to something and doing it consistently, working hard at it over time equals results.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like, with everything you've gone on to do you feel like that initial mind like connection to regimenting yourself that hard or working that hard in hockey has now spilled into everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was very fortunate to do it consistently for quite a few years at a young age. And it helped me get a mental frame on really what success looks like. You
Yeah.
can become better than everybody you know at something in 3 to 6 months. It takes years to get better than the best. And there's this gap of you don't know what you don't know when you start, and so you'll look around, like if you're a fitness coach you'll be like, oh, like there's people who make 10K a month. You can knock that out in 3 months if you're really
Yeah.
focused. And then all of a sudden you realize like I just entered the pond and I'm now
Yeah.
the smallest fish. um, and when you are able to have done something in your life where you've done that once, it allows you to then enter everything else with that same frame of what I can perceive right now when I'm starting this as like massive success is probably the first step in many steps. And
Hmm.
so being able to understand that the work you're going to put in to achieve that result, it might come quickly, it might come slowly, uh, but knowing that that's not going to change the trajectory of what you're planning to do over the next 3 to 5 years, those are the people who really are successful. And it comes from being able to do it once. And that's why I tell people too, like, if you were successful in the gym, you're so primed to be successful in business because you figured
Yep.
out like, oh, I got kind of in shape after like 60, 90 days, 120 days of doing something. But like you became a coach because you did this for years and like you stuck to it and you went through the seasons and the cycles and you started to understand too, like, okay, I thought I knew everything like half a year in, then I realized I knew nothing. And now 5 years later, I feel like I know less than I knew back when I thought I knew everything in 6 months,
Yeah.
and so it's, I think, a really powerful mental frame. And if you've never done it, do it. Like do something and really commit to it for like a year or two before you decide you're going to pivot or do anything else, because it will open your mind to just how expansive a single topic can be and the amount of effort you can put into it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think first of all, you said a lot of great things there. There's this quote that I have, which I can probably find it, but it talks about how each kind of new level that you unlock, you understand exactly how inadequate you've always been.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm gonna mark this clip because I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Let me
While
find
you're
it real quick.
finding it, I think it ties into that kind of valley of despair chart that everyone sees too, is like that's not a one and done. It's every level hits that. Like when you start, you're like, oh, like everyone's doing this. I can do so much. And then you start doing it, then you realize there's a lot more, and you hit the valley of despair, and then you keep going through it and you see success. But like it doesn't just stop at the success. It's like that's the next level. Then you get to the next level and you're like, oh my gosh, there's people doing this much. And you're like, I can do that too. And then you start doing that much and you realize all the other things that are involved in doing that much. And you go back into the valley of despair. And
Yep.
so it's this never-ending game, and that's the fun part. Is it's as you know, it keeps going. And if you ever think like, oh, you're just going to stop and hop off, it's like then you're not built for this, because if you aren't continually trying to innovate or keep climbing the ladder or keep going up the next levels, eventually you'll stall out and someone else who is will take your place. And if that scares you, it's like it might not be for you. You have to be someone who's kind of addicted to that
Yeah.
that continual progression.
Yeah. So that quote's, the better you get, the better you realize you can become. The more you work, the more painfully you become aware of your deficiencies. And I think it encompasses exactly what you're talking about. And I've noticed it myself as we've scaled AR, is like at every new level that we reach, I realize how little I actually know about business at these levels, right? Because like being an entrepreneur, yes, it's tough and yes, it's hard. And I want to get into your thoughts on the obsession side of things that you kind of just alluded to, but it is infinitely harder each new threshold that you pass. And that's something that also is what keeps somebody like you, somebody like me engaged and obsessed with it, is you're never going to reach a spot as an entrepreneur where you have everything figured out, and you're never going to reach a spot as an entrepreneur that there's not a new challenge coming to you, really, if you're involved in the business still, every single day, multiple times a day. So like if you're somebody that loves to overcome challenges, entrepreneurship is the spot to be in. If you're somebody that hates new challenges and wants the kind of the monotony and security, entrepreneurship is probably not for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that is a topic that's very hard to talk about as a coach, because it dissuades so many people when they hear that and it's not flashy. And there's a reason why you don't hear it in coaches marketing, is because if someone told you that up front, if they told you how much you're signing up for, if they told you all the different, pitfalls, nights where you stay up with anxiety, times where you're just looking at your future and you're like, I have no idea how this is going to work out, it would stop almost anyone from starting. It's almost a blessing to not know that going in,
Yeah.
because I think anyone who enters this with a full knowledge of what is ahead is like, oh, I don't know if I'll do that again, let alone do that the first time. And so
Yeah.
there's kind of this comfort in being blind to it. But at the same time, like you said, there's a temperament to an entrepreneur where underneath the anxiety, there's a little bit of excitement. And they say that anxiety and excitement are really the same like chemical production in the body, and it's more how we perceive the emotion. I think entrepreneurs become really good at realizing, oh, this thing I'm anxious about, it's not going to kill me. And in fact, the anxiety is just me knowing I should take action on something and I'm not taking it. And so when you're an entrepreneur, if you just start taking action towards everything, if a crisis comes up, instead of thinking about all the ways it can destroy you, you just start working towards fixing it. You realize really quickly nothing really ever destroys you, and you're actually way better at fixing stuff and finding solutions than you think you are. And I think everyone has the mindset in them. It's whether or not they're gonna take the leap and bet on themselves and say, I can become this and I can do this regardless of how hopeless it may seem at that time. And whether you have that starting out or you develop it over time, it's something that has to be there if you keep going in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think it's a muscle. I definitely think it's a muscle that you have to exercise and grow, because it's not something that, everybody gets into entrepreneurship because of the glorification of, being your own boss and setting your own hours and free to work from wherever, and like all the things that we kind of like see that are super cool about being an entrepreneur. But people don't realize, the like you're saying, the pitfalls that they can, there's a lot of stages you have to go through first before you get to do those things, right? And even then, it's like you have to build your business in a very specific kind of way for you to even be able to get to that point at all within your business. You have to scale the right team in the right way with the right
Yeah.
people that can all handle it, so that you can be the guy or the girl that is disconnected and does your own thing.
Yeah.
um so it's a completely, the whole premise and the glorification of entrepreneurship is kind of what feeds everybody into thinking that they can do it, which I think is, to your point, good that people believe that they can at least try, because then more people are willing to try, and more people actually end up exposing themselves to entrepreneurship and bringing great things to the table. But it also hurts us, I think, because now we do have a lot of marketing and marketers that only push towards that glorification, like that end goal that everyone sees, even though knowing that, like, hey, it's probably not going to look like this for you. And I think we
Yeah.
all fall into it. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that some of like Mike and I stuff about scaling coaching companies and stuff like that's, I'm sure you probably talk about the same type of thing, like people want to buy the outcome,
Yeah.
and getting to the outcome though, that's the tricky part.
Yeah. I think that it's it's something that I struggle with my content a lot. And I think that I'm much slower in client acquisition, but much longer in client LTV
Mm,
because I really try to measure myself, to be honest with people. Um, if you study kind of the irresistible offer that like Hormozy touts, that comes from an older kind of framework in the Dan Kennedy era. They're called SIN offers. Todd Frank, Dan Kennedy, these guys kind of made these really popular. And it's superior, irresistible, and new. And there's all these metrics that go into it. And what happens is you can get so caught up in just blasting that at the marketing side that you completely ignore kind of the message of the brand. And I think that's why there's a lot of like burn and churn in coaching companies nowadays. Is a lot of people come in and they just come in on the hyped up promises and the done for you pieces and the done for you
mm,
outcomes even. Um, and that's dangerous because I think a lot of people they have to go through that first and foremost. One, because it's just a marketing principle. They will buy that first. They're going to
yeah.
buy that before they buy the real thing because they have to learn that lesson. And it's just human psychology. They're going to go for the superior, the irresistible, the new thing first. Once they realize that there's more to this, that's when having something that's built on the principles of leadership, of pulling up the whole, of a rising tide kind of raises all boats. You get people into a community where everyone's kind of sunk in and realize, like, okay, if I'm really going to do this, here's what it looks like. Here's how I'm going to take accountability for my business. Here's how I'm going to track all my metrics. Here's how I'm going to know everything from the inside out. And I'm going to do it alongside people who have done it before. And I'm going to do it alongside people who are holding the same mindset as me as we do it. Then all of a sudden it's like you're leaning on people who are in the struggle with you, and all of the people who are just trying to buy the outcome, they either drop out or they never buy in the first
Mm,
place. Over time, I think it's a much better marketing strategy too, because your success rate as a program goes up. The people who you have long-term relationships with are highly successful, and it's because you're more honest. And I think, like anything, your cost to acquire a customer and your client LTV are the two things that determine whether a business wins or not.
yep.
You can burn and churn through marketing, but eventually you run out of ad spend dollars to keep up with the churn. And so a
Hmm.
lot of these guys will pop up the 50K, 100K months and they'll churn out. And so really trying to find that ethical balance between what is the mission we're doing here, what is the expectation of you, and empowering that person through leadership whether you're me coaching coaches or you're a coach coaching your clients, like that's what's going to get that buy-in from people is you have to teach someone how to fish. You can't give them fish. I mean, that goes back as far as like, adages go.
Yeah,
That's what we're really in the business of doing.
I love that. Let's get back into your story. So you went from hockey, right? Looking at schools, looking at how to take that to the next level. Where did you end up getting kind of interwoven on that road into fitness coaching or just fitness in general?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, my parents very religious. I kind of had two routes to go. I was looking at a couple schools where I was going to play hockey.
Hmm.
Even one of my local schools was University of Delaware. They had a good team. I think they were like a D2 team. It wasn't anything fantastic, but I had the chance to know a lot of the guys a little older than me who are now on the team. I was thinking of going there. My parents basically said, "Hey, we want you to go to a Catholic college. We'll pay for a Catholic college and help you with your loans and stuff. We'll co-sign on them with you. We won't do that for a non-Catholic college." And so I kind of made the decision that I didn't see myself going to the NHL. So I thought maybe it's better if I just kind of have a realistic view of life and I get a corporate
Yeah.
job, which was the worst worst mindset to go into one of these things with. But I drank the Kool-Aid. I gave up on the dream and made my parents happy. Went to the Catholic college, and they had no sports. And so I immediately was like, I need to fill this with something. And so right off the rip, like second or third weekend, like I found the gym. I started going to it. Um, Met a couple guys, and that's how I made friends. I was like, "Hey, you guys want to like come to the gym with me?" Uh, and within the first couple of months, I had a group of like 20 guys, and we would all go. And the big thing was we would do leg days on Fridays, and I told everyone every month we're going to build up. So just make sure if you don't come to anything else, just come to the leg days on Fridays, and we build up. So that the fourth month is called Hell Week, and that's where we have like the most reps, the most sets, and everyone does it together. And I was up to like I'd have like 20 guys where we take over the gym, we do these giant group things together, and I wasn't charging anything. It was just like something for fun, but that's what
That's
kind
so
of
cool.
sparked that passion for it. And then I was like, I could probably get a job at this gym. I could also probably like start running my own classes. That kind of sparked me into it. And just because I've been doing it for fun, I immediately had like a roster of guys who were like, yeah, dude, I'll pay for a program. I'll do stuff. Like, I love this. Um, and from there, the next 4 years, I just fell in love with the coaching peach. I was filming on like an iPhone 4 on a little tiny like clip-on tripod in the gym, and people thought I was nuts because no one did that back then. And that's really kind of how I got my first taste of training people and helping out. And that was like 2013, 2014.
So were you during this whole time, were you still going to school? Were you still kind of, like you said, drinking the Kool-Aid of like, I'm going to go get a corporate job. This is all going to end in, a
Yeah.
year, 2 years.
Yeah. I was getting a degree in finance and a minor in exercise science. And I thought, I'll work a corporate job for a while and then I'll have the business know how to maybe one day open my own gym, which is I think a lot of trainers,
Yeah.
especially with a lot of the people we've done thousands of like interviews with people and sales calls. And number one thing that they tend to say is like, I want to open a gym, right? I want to do this, make some money for myself, open a gym. And I had that same goal. And I figured if I have a cushy job, a good corporate job that'll provide me a nice salary, I can do the online training on the side and then eventually, use that to start something.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you start to transition into, I guess first, were you doing online coaching at all during this time?
I started in 2016. By sophomore year, I was like booked out. Like I just could not. I had no more time between classes and all the in-person clients, and
Mhm.
I was up to like 2 to 3 people a session. And I would just spend my whole day in the gym. Group one would come in, group two. So I kind of was like, I need to figure out a way to like help more people because more people wanted to, and I just was like, I felt bad. I was like, I literally don't have time for it. I'm sorry. So the online was kind of born out of necessity, and there wasn't anything back then. Like all of us who started these big programs that like are out there today, like we were all figuring this out during this time period. And I didn't even know about online coaching or the online space.
Yeah.
So I started doing like Excel and email marketing, like how most coaches do it. You'll start just make programs and email them out to people. And that's kind of my first time dabbling into that.
Gotcha. Okay. So then talk about that next evolution. So it comes time to graduate college. What happens?
Yeah. So I secured an internship like last minute
Okay.
because I didn't have any jobs lined up coming out of college. So I secured an internship for the summer, um, and it was 2 hours away. So I would commute at like 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. to get there. It was a wealth management firm. So I was just like doing tax loss selling and lots of like not fun financial analyst stuff. And
Hmm.
But it was nice because I would finish up, I'd go straight to the gym, commute home, edit my content for the day, do client check-ins, go to bed, repeat. Um, but I think that was the first time I quickly realized, oh, in the real world, you have way less time than you do in college. Like I'm not doing
Yeah.
check-ins between classes, and I can't just pop back and forth. Like I'm in an office doing stuff for 8 of my hours of the day, and I'm still training another two. So I was like, I commute 4, which is not normal, but at the time I was like, I have like no time to do this. And that's when I really started to dig in more into the online space. I started figuring out, okay, how to use Trainerize, how do you do some of these apps, how do I connect these things. I got my first mentor, Coach's Cartel. I don't think it's owned by the same guy anymore, but I joined his mentorship program, and
Okay.
he kind of like laid it out for me. He was from Australia, and he called, tell me in this Australian accent, all right, well, you got to do this, you got to do this. All right, we're going to download this. And I was just like, whatever you say, man. Um,
Hmm.
and that really kind of opened my eyes to, oh, okay, this is my escape route. Because before I even landed the corporate job, which I landed later that summer, I was already like, I don't want to do this. Like
Hmm.
this is now a means to an end. There's no way I'm doing this for 40 years.
Gotcha. So you land on the corporate job. Do you ever end up going to the corporate job? Like what was that timeline there as far as like when did Will start full-time online coaching?
Yeah, it was 2.5 years later. So I was in that corporate position for 2.5 years.
Gotcha. I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah, and it is tough. So I got married the right out of college. So I
Hmm.
dated the entire time, got engaged literally that summer out of college, and then got married. And I was really focused on helping my wife start her business. So I was like, I will do the corporate thing. So we have benefits, we've got all this stuff, and I'll kind of work on my thing around the edges while we make your thing the main goal. And so for those 2 years, just like anything, right? If you split your focus, very hard. So the majority of my focus went into helping her start her business, and I kind of put my thing on the back burner during that time. And so it maintained, but it stayed very stagnant, right? 10 to 20 clients online, people from college. I'm not doing a lot of outreach. I'm not doing a lot of growth. It's just holding. And that's kind of, it helped me understand where a lot of coaches come from now, which is you get to this point where you're not doing anything or you don't know what to do to reach new people. And so you stay in this kind of hopeless realm of, I've got enough people to like kind of call this a side hustle or a full-time job, maybe,
Yeah.
but I have no vision of how I would ever go further than this. Um, so yeah, those 2 years, those 2.5 years were rough.
Hmm.
An hour commute, sit in an office under these fluorescent lights every day. I was in a job that I knew I 100% could be replaced at any minute. I was like, this is not necessary. This was a
Yeah.
fluff hire that I am just sitting here because they wanted to put more people under this department. So yeah, it was this feeling of hopelessness. I knew I was meaningless and valueless to the company, but all at the same time, I was without any time to put towards my goals. And so it was really for 2 years a deep kind of dive into the psychology of like how you get beaten into just submission in that kind of culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of just corporate culture in general is just, um, that's why I think people end up miserable in a lot of those types of situations is they don't have the room or space to be creative,
Yeah.
right? Or to create in general, or to engage in things that they're passionate. They're just kind of put into this square box, and then slid into this spot that's perfectly square as well, and then it's kind of like, no, you stay right here.
Yeah.
And it's not like that everywhere, but a lot of places that's kind of the exact same thing. Andrew Tate would call it the matrix, right?
The
Like
Matrix.
it's
Yeah.
they plug you right in, and then you're just kind of operating in within the matrix.
Yeah. Did you
um
stand up on a stool and look over all the cubicles, and it is an eerie feeling of
yeah.
how real that actually is when you're inside one of these offices.
Yeah. And it's so wild to me because I kind of had a similar. It sounds like you were way more popular than me in terms of getting more sessions booked, but I had a similar I guess time at the end of college where I had gotten hired by this and they were, I guess you would call them a startup. It was like less than 10 people, but it was
Yeah.
they hired me to come run their sales and marketing for a bunch of brands, and they'd heard about some of the stuff that I had done with other companies and all that. and they knew that I was still a full-time student. So they just offered me like a salary that like I had never made that much money. It was
Mm.
40K. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll come in and make 40K and do all the stuff I'm currently doing. And like, you guys know I got to finish school, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I was already training people in person and doing like a couple of online things for like $50 a month for like friends and family. Um, and so I basically took this job. I was full-time student, full-time at this company now. And then I was also in the 2 hours before like work would start, I was training people and or hitting my own workout for 30, 45 minutes. And then, lunch break, and then going to classes throughout the day if I had classes, and then back to work if I had to go back to work. And then the rest, like the 5 p.m. to 9, 10 p.m. was getting my workout if didn't get my workout yet, train more people if I haven't trained them. And then I also, um, you know, foolishly had started my fitness equipment company. So I'd go home and ship orders for that on top of everything that I would ship out the next night or
Yeah.
next morning. So it was like, I understand that type of a schedule. And I remember thinking like college is so tough, man. Like I don't understand how
Yeah.
people do this. And then getting into like the real world after I graduated, I was like, what? That actually wasn't that tough. Like I had so much time to go do a bunch of things. Not during that season, obviously, but just college in general. But I never got to experience like the full corporate thing. Like so this company was very non-corporate. It was
Yeah.
just like there's these brands, we need help marketing these brands, and it was kind of just like if everyone does a good job, we're all good here.
Yeah.
So that is so I never knew you had a corporate background.
Yeah. It's a blessing that you didn't go into it because I've had to, there's good things that I've drawn out from it. I'm good at structuring businesses because I was an analyst on a product line. I know exactly how like a $4 to $8 billion company structures a product line now. And I've been able to see that, and I see them roll it all the way up to like the CFO reviewing the financials of an entire business doing that much. And so I'm like, okay, this is what this looks like in the big leagues. I can now break this down. I can create the same system for your small coaching business. The downside of it is you drink the Kool-Aid. You like adopt the mindset you need to adopt to survive in
Yeah.
that type of environment. And you have to do a lot of unlearning. I think it did not irreparable damage, but it did a lot of damage to like the entrepreneurship mindset I had because I was very entrepreneurial before
Hmm.
it. And then I think, even just in these past couple of years, right? It was six or so years out of college. It took me to really get back to that pure entrepreneurial spirit. It beats it out of you fast and it replaces it very quickly because you have to. You
Yeah.
can't be an entrepreneur in one of those positions because they don't need that. They need you to really be almost like what AI is becoming, which is just someone who has
The
the
tool.
answers for a very specific thing, a specific use case, and you're there to plug it in because they haven't figured out how to do it automatically yet. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
not having to go through that's helpful.
yeah, and I mean even the flip side of what you're talking about, that makes so much sense because Mike and I talk about all the time, um, with our roles with AR, right, and how we've kind of built the company. We were both kind of I think the reason there was so much chaos in the beginning of AR was we were both like the visionary, and we
Yeah,
both were just idea guys, and there was very little like follow through and execution on the back end. We did a great job of like growing and scaling the company super super fast, but we didn't have any
yeah,
systems. We had neither of us had worked in a structure that we knew to pull from that was actually set up and successful to be able to build that for us and for our employees and for our business. And so it's taken a lot of stuff on my part to do a lot of research and like gather everything that I possibly can about operations so that I can actually be the COO and actually step in and figure out, okay, what does this all look like in action?
yeah.
Um, and so that part I think is going to serve you well, especially as you continue to kind of scale your companies the way you're scaling them. Um, 2.5 years, right? You worked in that job, and then what did once you got your wife's company up to a spot where you felt comfortable enough to go and do your own thing? What did that look like? What did that transition look like out of corporate America into fitness coaching?
Dude, I felt lost I didn't know what to do. I was so used to it sounds nice that I had all these clients at college, but it was my introduction to a topic in marketing that's called a blue ocean.
Okay.
Um, Essentially, a blue ocean, easy sailing, right? It's just there's no one fighting over anything. Where a
Mhm.
red ocean is, you're there, everyone's warring, battling, the water's bloody, like it's just churned up. I was at this school and it was a small Catholic school. No one was doing fitness. And so anyone who ever wanted to get in shape, there was one guy in town to go to. I was the guy. And there
Yeah.
was really no competition. And so it was really easy for me. It was like sitting at a front desk and everyone who walked in that gym who wanted coaching, I was just like, well, I'm the guy. So come work with me.
Mhm.
Having to then go and realize, oh, there's competition out here now. I have to compete. Those first couple of years were really me struggling to figure out what does offer creation look like when you now have to compete at a high level in a red ocean. Because a lot of my stuff just like fell out on its face. I was just creating content. Um, and it would land a little bit here and there, but it wasn't like I had this meteoric rise to success. I grinded to like 8 to 10K a month over like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was really a lot of that time was spent learning, I think from 2017 to 2019, 90% of that time was spent below 10K. And then when I kind of figured it out, then it jumped to like 20 or 30. And that was
Mhm.
only at the very end. And then once I had that aha moment, I was like, oh my gosh, if I did this like 2 years ago, like darn it. But there was no
Yeah.
one to kind of give you that roadmap. So those following years out of college were tough. And then the other part too was, we were doing well with the other business, extremely well. And I'm watching it scale. And one part of me is like, not going to catch up to that anytime soon. And the other part of me too is like, I don't have a fire under my butt to like get going because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm helping out this business and we're doing ridiculous numbers that like my, corporate brain just could not even like comprehend. I'm like, we are making this and we get to take all this home like every month. Like, oh my gosh. And then we moved to the we moved to the Cali coast, from the East Coast. We're living by the beach now. Got this beautiful penthouse apartment. I wasn't trying to make rent and this was my only way out. And so that was actually hard for me was there wasn't that external pressure to
Wow.
to do it. There's only the internal pressure of me being like, I want to do my thing and I want to prove to myself that I can also do something that's completely my own.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for coaches who have external pressure, it's actually a blessing. Like my best clients are guys who lost their job, invested their last penny, and were like, all right, as Goggins would say, like, I burned the boats, got to make this work. They
Yeah.
do. Almost every single one of them does. Because it's kind of it's fortuitous to find yourself in that circumstance because you will make it work. When
Mhm.
you're most susceptible to failure is when you're kind of in that wishy-washy in between. I think that's why it took me so long was because whether or not I signed 5 or 6 clients that month had no bearing on whether or not bread was on the table.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of was in that middle wash of trying things with content, but not being super consistent for quite a while. And when I finally decided I need to lock in, I need to do this, I'd done some competitions which helped me with my mindset and understanding, there's another level to really locking in with discipline and stuff. When I started to carry that into the business, um, funny enough, that's when it popped. And it was as simple as do things consistently, track the numbers, adjust, do them consistently again. And within a
Yeah.
couple months, you blow up. Uh,
Do you find that you as an entrepreneur, do you find that you need that kind of like sense of urgency? As far as like I know, and I've done this myself. I can't even say that I haven't. And I found myself in a couple of situations similar to what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, wait, these streams of revenue just got like shut off out of
yeah.
nowhere, and now I've got to figure this out, or I can't like make my rent payment.
Yeah.
um I found myself in a couple of those, but I've also found myself, because I know how I operate with my back against the wall, I found myself before making investing in investments into whether it's mentorships or new computer or this shiny thing over here or whatever, because I'm like, if I do that, if I throw this amount of money at that, like I've got to figure it out now, like I've
Yeah.
got to do it, I've got to. Do you ever attach like those external loads to yourself to on purpose to do that, or do you find yourself now to be more intrinsically motivated because you had to learn that way?
Definitely a bit of both, but I would say I almost do it on purpose now, especially if there's an area where I can just tell I'm not performing how I want to perform. So like recently, my biggest one was I had like it was like my second biggest investment ever. It was like a mid 5 figure paid upfront investment in a coaching program to do like organic content, and it was just a whirlwind of stuff that immediately I was like, I didn't know I should be doing this. All these hires that I was going to make. But it did the same thing. I had done well. Full time fit coach had a good couple of months. We had a huge cash reserve. And I was like, dude, I could throw this into ads and do more. I'm like, or I could really invest this in this spot that I'm weak at. And I knew if I invested it, one, deplete the reserves, and it would be a little closer to be like, okay, we're running at like our burn rate now. And so if this doesn't work, I'm going to start going into the red. And
Hmm.
so it put my back against the wall. And I think it also forces you to be like, okay, you're going to pay attention to what you're doing, and it's going to force you to condense the amount of time it needs for you to acquire the skill that you feel like you're deficient in. And that's what I really think coaches mean when they're like, oh, you need to always be learning, is a little bit of that. You always need to be pushing yourself. And whether that's achieved internally, by you doing a lot of mindset work. Some people, that's like their big thing. They invest a lot in mental courses that help them kind of create that internal pressure. Or if it's just this, acquiring the skill in this team costs a lot, and if I put the money out there for it, then externally I'm going to be a little stressed. Go for it. That is, I think, the best thing you can do, because it's only in the times where we get complacent that you lose. Because in business, it's not like your physique. With your physique, like if you get metabolically healthy and in good shape, like just having muscle tissue on your frame and not eating like an idiot,
Yeah.
you can pretty much maintain that shape. Like unless you get really off track, like you'll look pretty good all the time.
Hmm.
With business, it's the opposite. It's if you slow up at any point in time, you move backwards. There is no such thing as standing still in business. And so if
Nope.
you're not finding ways to kind of keep moving forward, you think you're going to stay steady like other aspects of your life might, and you don't. Um, I think Dan Coe, he said it best. He was like, you need to like move cities, buy an apartment where the payment is a little bit higher than you're comfortable with, because it's going to force you to work to stay there. You want to keep staying in a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of a rock in your shoe almost, because it reminds you that there's work to be put in.
Yeah.
And I think some people would just directly argue and say like that's not healthy, but that's part of the entrepreneurship game. Is like I said, like in 6 months you can be better than everybody you know. And if
Yeah.
you're comfortable at that point, you can stop there and you can do the minimum viable amount of work needed to stay there. But if you want to be great, if you want to do these numbers that are huge, that you see people on like the posters for programs doing, you have to be okay with going into deep, long seasons of it, of not sustainable work. Like no one steps on stage after a sustainable prep and wins. It's the same thing with business. No one has these massive numbers. I think it's push yourself, find your limit, get outside of your comfort zone as fast as you can, and stay there as long as you can. And once you've achieved near burnout, recuperate, recover, stabilize where you've gotten to, and then recharge yourself mentally and physically so you can do it again. And
Hmm.
that kind of cycle is what will continue growing you. And if that turns you off to entrepreneurship, then better it turn you off now than when you've gotten in, and worse off if it is a point where like you have other people who depend on you. Because if you're going to be
Yeah.
the CEO and you're going to have mouths that depend on you, you really have to be okay with the kind of this idea of there are seasons that are going to come where you have to push and push and push. And that idea of having a team that just does everything for you is a 10-year vision. It's not a 2-year vision.
No. No, it's not. It's not. And that weight of literally being responsible for other people is something I 100% did not appreciate until we've scaled AR to where it's at. And now the whole no one teaches you any of these things. No one
Yeah.
teaches you how to do a salary negotiation with people. No one teaches you how to hire and figure out if it's going to be the right fit. No one
Yeah.
teaches you how to fire somebody. Dude, firing somebody is like the
Sucks.
worst. Like it is the worst. And like it's these things are not things that like there's no handbook out there. You know what I mean? On figuring a lot of this stuff out. So it's stuff that you have to go through in order to get to kind of what you're talking about. Um, but I think those seasons are so important too, because it teaches you, just like a prep is going to teach you a lot about, and I know you've been through a bodybuilding prep and I want to talk about that, but just like a prep is going to teach you a lot about like your own mental fortitude and like what you're capable of physically and like what you can take your body to, like where your breaking points are. I think those seasons that you're talking about where you're deep in the work, you're deep in the risk and in the pushing and just in the entrepreneurial like trenches, trying to fight your way out of it. I think those are crucial for the development of a just as crucial for the development of an entrepreneur as a diving deep as a prep and as an athlete is to a successful prep and showing. Um, so I think you said that beautifully, much more beautifully than I ever could have. Um, but how do you balance before we move back into your fitness business? How do you balance the risk tolerance that you have to have as an entrepreneur as you're scaling your business to making sure that you are stabilizing at different levels and making sure that everyone around you is good? Because I think that's something that Mike and I have always struggled with is we both have a very much of an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
And so it's like, let's spend it. It's probably going to help us out and we can always make more money. You know what I mean? But that's not a healthy way to always be growing that business, because you're right. Like things could, I know, like the Stripe stuff that you were talking about and you posted
Yeah.
about the other day. It's like your revenue could literally, with a press of a button, be like cut off from you. And then what happens? You know what I mean? Like you're if you don't have other stuff in place, you're screwed. So how do you balance the risk averse mentality that you need to have as an entrepreneur with the risk tolerance that you need to have as an entrepreneur with the risk averse, safer, we have to stabilize at each new level?
I think it really comes down to understanding that abundance mindset is absolutely necessary, but it can also be used as an excuse to not do the work. And so looking at stuff and just saying, oh, it'll always be okay, we can always make more money is true, but it has to line up with a plan in reality. And then
Yeah.
you ask yourself, well, how do I plan that in reality? And that's where it comes to numbers. At a certain point, the minute you get past 10K in a business, if you don't know every number inside your business and track it, it's not going to grow. We call
Yep.
it the forever 10K coach. It's fly by the seat of my pants. I'll invest in some stuff. I'll do things here and there that will, and again, we've like plotted this across like 300 coaches. Always and every time, you will just churn between 8 and 12K forever. And you might get lucky and have a bigger month, but you'll go right back to that until you start knowing your numbers, knowing the ones that are important and tracking them. You'll never make data informed decisions to grow. And that's a big leap that you have to make. This is no longer a hobby that I do. This is a business that I run. And cash is the lifeblood of the business. And so you can't just you can't just drain it dry. It'll die. So having those numbers, having those metrics tracked, and being able to say, I'm willing to risk it all, but knowing that it all represents a certain percentage that we're able to go to without killing the business is key. And so having a system to track that, having a COO who knows those numbers, who can say, all right, cool, I'm operations, you're the visionary, you want to do this, cool. We can risk up to here. If we go beyond that, even if it works, it won't work in time, or it'll just be reckless. And
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot of talk. It comes out of a lot of like tech entrepreneurs who are like, you have to be constantly innovating if you die, and you have to move fast. And that's true, but we're not Silicon Valley tech startups that are like competing against each other in a hyper fast niche with hundreds of employees. You can build your business over the next 5 to 10 years, and someone will take your money for that offer tomorrow, the same they will today. The next greatest way to make money online will have a course for it that you can buy 6 months from now as you do today. And a lot of times we're just trying to put a band-aid on a bullet wound that would be solved by just understanding the basics. One of the first things we do before we give any flashy stuff to our coaches is just like, hey, here are 4 tracking sheets that are going to track all the 4 buckets you need to know: content, conversations, calls, and clients. If you track your 4 C's with 4 tracking sheets, you know all the numbers associated with them, you can get this sustainably to 10K without ever doing anything else. And then you can decide from there whether you want to keep growing or if you just want to hang out there. And that, I think, gives a lot of peace to people because they'll get anxious too. They don't know what's happening. And when you don't know what's happening, you're either going to just take a leap of faith because that's better than staying where you don't know, or you're going to always be reserved and never grow. But when you know those numbers, you're in the most optimal spot, which is you know exactly how things are going, how things are moving, and you can make informed risk.
Yeah. I love that. And I want to hit on two things that you said. First of all, knowing your numbers is the most important thing that any entrepreneur can do. It's like if you don't know your numbers, if you haven't done the work to actually figure out how to track them, how to figure out how the team, especially you have multiple people in
Yeah.
your on your team, because whenever it was just me and Mike, that was one thing. But as we scaled and had employees and stuff, us not, I wrote this down in an email today. As you scale a company, especially past 6 and 7 figures, every inefficiency or imperfection that you have as an owner gets magnified with each new hire. Because if you're doing it inefficiently and you care so much about it, and this is your baby that like makes or breaks if you take home income this month, somebody that doesn't care as much is going to see you doing that inefficiency, copy you as they should, right? Copy what you're doing, and they're going to magnify it because they care less. It's
Yeah.
not their baby. This is just a paycheck to them, right? So that's a big part of it is knowing your numbers. And the other side, the other thing that you kind of hinted at, and I'm sorry I keep jumping around in your timeline,
No, you're
but
good.
the other thing that you hinted at that I think is so powerful is we tell coaches as well. It's like you don't have to build a $50,000 a month coaching business. Like it's okay if you want to go hover in the 10 to 15K range, be a solo operation, not have anyone else to work with, and depending on where you live, $10 to $15,000 a month is great money to
Yeah.
live a great life. You know what I mean? And a lot of coaches really want that when they think that they have to want the bigger scaled up company that has 5 assistant coaches and 3 VAs and a COO and a CFO and like all of these things where their overhead and their stress is like they're taking home less money themselves than the 10K coach because they've scaled to this spot where they feel not worth it at that point. They begin to
Yeah.
hate their own company. So what's your opinion on that part of like scaling out of what you truly want or desire?
Yeah. So that our long-term vision for every coach is that they're going to have a seven-figure business, but our tagline is making seven figures sustainable. And so a full-time fit coach, that's kind of the launch pad. Can you
That's
follow
awesome.
instructions? Will you do what we tell you? Can you be consistent? Because if you can do those things, you'll be successful. And then from there, we have our, I never talk about it online, but it's our upper level mastermind. It's called Coaches Collective. It's just a collective of all the coaches who have graduated. And from there, we work with them personally to say, like, okay, how do you want to get to seven figures? Because there's a million ways to make seven figures online. And once you start really getting into digital marketing, you realize like it sounds huge, but seven figures is very doable.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is look at that and say, oh, because so and so made seven figures this way, I have to.
Hmm.
Because what you're going to realize as you build that is one, I could have made seven figures all along. But then two, it didn't have to be the way I built it. And I hate the way I built it. And then that's where coaches either quit or they have the arduous journey of doing 2 to 3 years of tearing it down, firing, restructuring. And like, I've done this before. We've had teams of like up to 20 salespeople. We've done massive like build outs and then realize like, oh, just because so and so did this doesn't mean it's efficient or it works for us. And you have to tear it all down. It's the
Yeah.
worst part about business. So being honest with yourself and being honest with your clients too, being like, hey, like if you want to go to seven figures, you're probably going to enjoy this less than just making 100K a year. Most people are the happiest when they just make 100K per year. You live a simple, not even like they say simple life, but it's like you're not trying to put a Lamborghini in your driveway, right? Like you're much less stressed out. Once you decide to go to seven figures, the next big key step after going all in is being really intentional in the planning process of like, okay, how am I going to build this? Because you want to build a really, really wide base so that you can quickly go as high as possible. And in that wide base are going to be all the pillars that you build this thing on. And you want them to align with your vision and your goals for the people you're going to bring in, the amount of time you want spent either in the business or with people. And at the end of the day, the type of clientele and relationship you're going to have with them. Once those things are all in alignment, the actual process of then scaling that up is relatively simple. It's in the building that and then partnering with someone who understands the different ways you can build this and having them kind of draw out from you really what you want at an emotional level for like how your business feels, how it scales, and what it looks like. If you don't go into the scaling process with that clear idea, you're going to end up with something you don't like.
Hmm.
But like I said, there's a million ways to make seven figures online, and you can do
Totally.
almost any of them with social media. So just drop the limiting belief that it's like, oh, it has to be structured this way. Most of the time, any coach who tells you that, that's just because it's the one way they've done it and that's all they know how to do. So, like, I'm not going to tell
Yeah.
you can do it any other way because I just don't know how. You can do it a million different ways. And if you understand the principles that underlie all the different tactics or structures you could build, then all you have to do is pick the structures and the tactics that you like that align with your vision and goals, and then just apply those principles to them over time, get the right guidance and feedback. But there's no one set size that'll fit all. And if you believe that, that's what gets people into that position where then they feel really burned out, or they feel almost lied to, where they're like, I was told it was going to be this way and I went, and the worst thing is I did it and I made it and I reached the quote unquote success I was promised, and I hated every second of it because they didn't tell me all the hidden costs, both financial and like personal, of doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful stuff. You mentioned it earlier. You kind of hinted at it earlier. You said that you saw whenever you were first scaling your coaching company, you saw a correlation between the business popping and whenever you would compete. So, what is the takeaway there that you kind of implemented into your business, and then you also maybe educate your coaches on now that you're helping scale?
Yeah, it's a practice that we call daily disciplines. And so for me, I was really good at following instructions growing up doing sports. Coach tells you to do laps, you do laps. That can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? A lot of us entrepreneurs, we hate that. We're like, dude, someone tells me to do something. I'm like, well, now I'm just not going to do it. I was going to do it anyway, but now that you
Yep.
told me to do it, now I'm not going to do it because I want to do
Yep.
my own thing.
Yep.
Um, when you really want to be a student, you have to mix that personality of carving out your own path and wanting to be innovative with being a student, being humble enough to learn from people who know more than you, and just trusting that if I follow their process, even if I think it's not the most efficient way to do it, I'm just going to do it because I trust that this person who's an expert might know a little better than me. And
Hmm.
so when I started doing preps, it was that same thing. I came in, all this ego, like I know better than my prep coach. I know better than this, that. That got me like last finished place in my first
Yeah.
show. And then I was like, oh, okay, shame on me. Like I don't know anything. Why do I have such an ego about this? When I went into future preps, very humble, just listened to my coach, did everything. Ended up being way harder. Sucked way more. Turns out I was kind of being like a wimp about it. And I was like, oh, all this know better was just me being like, well, I'm not going to do this hard stuff because I don't want to.
Yep.
When I started listening to them and actually putting that in that time and effort, and I did the daily disciplines they were telling me, the cardio, the no additives, the little tiny things that you might think don't matter. That was what changed. And that's why I have medals that I can put in my office now is because of that simple switch. When I started doing the fitness or the business coaching, I was like, I want to replicate that in what we do, because that at the same time was what was causing my business to do so well. Because I was doing these daily disciplines, I was attaching things in my business to it. When I was doing my cardio, I was doing all my social media work in the morning, so it always got done. When I was prepping my meals, I was going live and I was talking to people. I was attaching a discipline in business to a discipline in fitness. And because I had the accountability from someone who knew a little bit more in the fitness realm to get me to do it, I was by proxy getting this additional daily discipline for my business, and it always blew up. And then when I went back to doing it my own way, listening to my own excuses, letting myself talk me out of this, I lost the daily discipline, and it was the same in the business. And so having a set of disciplines that you just are non-negotiable on, and they're usually very simple, and we call them IGAs, income generating activities,
Hmm.
where it's not like I wake up every morning and I reassess my brand colors. It's I wake up every morning and I use that initial burst of energy to write my content and do my 20 or 40 outreaches, messages, DMs, responses. And I put all that initial brain power to this. And then I tie another one to another aspect of my day. That is what I found personally to work best. And I discovered that through prep. That's what prep really kind of illuminated for me, was when you're locked in with a plan and you've got someone holding you accountable to it, you will always grow faster, whether it's fitness or business. And so if you start to treat your sprints in business like a prep, you'll find that you have that exponential growth, that really locked in growth. And then, very similar to fitness, if you find a way to take those disciplines and make them habitual, and maybe you tone them down a little bit so they're sustainable, you can hit a sustainable run rate in your business as well.
Yeah. Dude, I love that daily disciplines. It reminds me of kind of the simpler framework of 75 hard. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I always, whenever I was on prep, to your point, for my bodybuilding show, I felt like I was locked in everything else, like everything else, because it just forces you to structure your day and build things in. And so if you can't put off the cardio and you can't put off the meals and you can't put off the workouts because you have to do it because someone else is telling you you have to do it, and you're holding yourself accountable to that stuff, it gets way easier to just, whenever other hard things come into your day, to be like, yep, knocked out, yep, knocked out, yep, knocked out. So I love that. And I mean, Mike was in his talk that he gave this past weekend. We traveled out to your neck of the woods, and he was very straightforward. And we do this a lot of our coaching calls for users of AR Funnel. He was very straightforward in that if you don't look like somebody that others should ask you for fitness advice from, like, you need to go look in the mirror and get to work yourself before you ask other people to pay you for fitness advice that they aren't seeking out from you. And
Yeah.
and he basically put it as simple as that. He's like, look in the, like, how many of you guys, he even said in the middle of a speech, and I was like, that might have been a little too harsh, but it's true. He's like, how many of you would be willing to take off your shirt right now and pose?
Little
And
little Elliot Army kind of style. I like it.
yeah, seriously. And everyone was kind of like looking around like, not me, I don't want to do it. And but it's very real talk, right? Like you if you are walking the walk and you're actually coaching, like I put out a video yesterday that was, if you're not actually getting into the gym and videoing
Yeah.
yourself coaching other people and actually talking to the camera, how are people supposed to envision themselves becoming a client of yours? You know what I mean? And if they don't see that you're putting in the work, there's so many people that are just they got an ambassadorship with some supplement company, and then now they think they're a coach and an authority. It's like, the authority is you showing that you've achieved the results, you showing that you know the thing, you showing that you can educate and bring people up to your level in the coaching space. Um, and so I think those daily disciplines is such a genius way to put it, because it is, if you can combine the two, that's the best of both worlds, because you're going to look the part if you're doing the physical daily disciplines, and you're going to be able to build the business if you're doing the I think you said IGAs.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that. Love that.
Yeah. I think a lot of coaches, they don't realize until you are a multi seven figure business and this has grown much bigger than you and it's a brand now,
Yep.
your business is a direct extension of you, your body and your mind. And if your mind is cluttered and disorganized, your business will be cluttered and disorganized. That's why when you lock in and people are like, yeah, dude, I feel so locked in on prep, it starts to show in their business as well. Well, it's a direct correlation. It's connected to you in your mind. The same idea goes for what you said with like the posting and stuff is your clients or your prospects and hopefully future clients, they're not mind readers. They don't know that you're locked in. They don't know that you're dialed in. You have to show up daily and show them. And there's a study done. It was like people need about 6 hours of your content. And that's the hardest thing with short form content right now is this is why people are so frustrated with DMs. They'll post a couple pieces, then they'll DM people to be frustrated. It's not a client right away.
Yep.
And I'll look at them and I'll be like, they've consumed maybe a minute and a half of your content. You need 6 hours of consumption. And so, one, you should be matching short form with longer form content. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean film a YouTube video. It means go live on TikTok for an hour. Our clients right now who go live on TikTok for an hour a day book on average 4 to 7 calls per day and
Yep.
close 1 to 2 clients per day. That equates to $30,000 to $80,000 per month is our average client run rate at that point. And most coaching programs they'd be like, that's a little bit of a wild claim, but it's true. It is literally just in the hard work. It is all they have to do. But it's because they've realized, okay, this business is an extension of me. So I need to constantly be taking what's in here and getting it in front of people. Really easy to do that on a live. And then realize that these reels and these other things is to get people to follow you, to get people in. It's the book cover at a bookstore. It's
Okay.
going to get you to take it off the shelf. It's not going to get you to read the whole book. But if you do a book reading and you're getting live and you're getting in front of people all the time and they can hear who you are, they can see your personality. It's not a pre-scripted, pre-written piece of content that feels very rehearsed, but it's really you. Well, then they start to know you and they start to like you a little bit. And after a couple hours, they might even start to trust you. And then when you put something in front of them, they opt in.
Yeah.
So understanding that it's like, yeah, your business for the longest time, it's going to be an extension of you. So one, get physically healthy, get mentally healthy, because if you look the part and you're locked in mentally, you're going to have the best chance and you're competing against other coaches who are going to try to do this. So if they're more fit or they're more locked in, they're going to beat you. Realize that until you're at 7.5, 8 figures, like it's going to be about you,
It's
and
got to
you're
be
going to
you.
be a huge face of that business until you're trying to exit it, if you ever do. And then realizing too that your clients aren't going to read your mind, and that you have to get it in front of them, and that is a lot more time than you may think it is. Just because it took you 6 hours to make the 30-second reel doesn't mean they see anything more than 30 seconds. So getting efficient with your time, getting efficient with those IGAs, and realizing, okay, the greatest return on my time here is just more of my face in front of people, getting them to know, like, and trust me.
Yeah. That's very similar to my kind of tagline for the whole year, and what I've told all of our coaches is like everyone that's more successful than you has more hours of themselves on the internet. Like period.
Yeah.
Everyone that is more successful than you has more hours of themselves on the internet. So what is the indicator that you should be going for? Put more hours of you on the internet.
Yeah.
Like,
That's why
and I
AR is so
promise your business will
powerful.
grow.
Yeah, it's why AR is so powerful. It's why I was like all in on you guys, because I was like, dude, if I can get someone to see one piece of my content and opt into something, and I can send them a year's worth of automated marketing material after that, I've got those hours going to every single person, but I'm tying it back to the short form content. That them taking the book off the shelf for a second to look at the cover, all they hear about for the next year is that book. And
Yeah.
every other book that's out there, maybe even the ones that they look at the cover one time, they're not hearing about that book again. They're going to buy that book when they decide to buy a book. And
Hmm.
that's what makes AR so powerful, is it takes these principles that we know now, is like just looking at the data after working with hundreds of coaches. Like, that's the thing that decides whether you're going to 7 figures or you're hanging around 6 to 5. It is that touch point piece. And so being able to automate that is like, I don't think many coaches have been in the game long enough to understand how game changing it is. And it's something I know I try to like get better at in my marketing, is like explaining this in terms that they'll understand.
Yeah.
But it is astronomically ahead of its time. And eventually everyone will do this. Like, everyone will just realize, like, oh, this is now, if you don't do this, like, you don't even have an online business.
Yep.
But right now, for the people who jump in early, it's like a gold rush. And that's why, like, especially for you guys, all your guys' client testimonials are like insane. Like, it's
Hmm.
almost like unbelievable. It's almost like you want to tone it down a little bit because it sounds sensational.
Yeah, we get
Um,
people to your point from earlier. We get people that come in and think that they can just press go on AR and
yeah,
then their business goes to 10K. And so we've had to do a lot of things to throw roadblocks in people's way when they're trying to book calls with us, or
yeah,
when they are trying to fill something out, where we're like, hey, like this is going to take work. You know,
yeah,
you've got to set up this software, believe it or not. Like, to use it, there's going to be a little bit of setup in it, you know. And that's something that even some people, like, it's helped us to disqualify some clients
yeah,
from making it to that next step, which is an unfortunate truth as you're scaling that you have to do,
yeah,
because you don't have time to talk to everybody. We've had to throw some of those roadblocks in to just make sure, like, if you can't even take a week, 2 weeks to set up this software and really do it right, like, you're probably not going to be successful in the software anyways.
yeah. And
So
it's sad
it's
because they're assigning themselves to a life on a manual hamster wheel. And they'll realize a year or two down the road, they'll be like, oh man, dude, like I should have focused a little bit more on that, because everyone else who's doing it now
mm-hmm.
is 2 years ahead of me. And it's not 2 years, it's like 2 decades with how this stuff works. Is like, that creates a business that's now sustainable and will almost inevitably make it to 7 figures.
Yeah.
And it's like that ability to task switch, to realize like that's the next rung. Like, you did all this basic coaching stuff. It's time to step up and kind of let go of this so you can do this piece now. And they want to stay in these pieces. But again, success is an elevator, and people will step off at all these different floors. And
Yeah.
so kind of just learning as a coach, whether it's your fitness clients or business clients, like, people will just be comfortable at a certain level, and they'll be like, I'm high enough. I'm happy to step off here. And a lot of times, the frustration for us is seeing the vision for them, where it's like, I know what you would look like at the top of the elevator. I wish you would stay on longer, but it's like trying to force a square peg through a round hole.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink.
Yeah.
So whenever you're making that transition from fitness coaching and you kind of figured out the X's and O's that you needed to scale rapidly, once you got to that point, right after you got off of the 8 to 10K back and forth, and you scaled up past that 20, 30K mark, whenever you switched into business coaching, did you experience any type of imposter syndrome making that switch?
Yeah, it was really weird, because I remember for me, it was like the 10K month was the thing that everyone was gunning for at the time. It was like, that 2018, 2019, it was pre-lockdown, the internet was exploding. Like, all this was like, you could make a ton of money online. It was like kind of seemed like you made it if you make it to 10K. And I
Yeah.
remember making it to 10K and not feeling any different. And then the next month doing 20 and being like, this is nuts. But then realizing, like, in the scheme of business, like, that was almost like no, it's hard to explain, but it was like it wasn't any more money. It was like I already kind of know, like the minute you start doing that, your horizons expand and you're like, okay, I'm gonna put all this money into these different places. And then all of a sudden I felt poorer having made 20 than I did making 10.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I started to have all these clients come through, and you'll just like sit down some days and you'll kind of pull back from your screen and you'll just sit there and like look at a sunset or something and be like, I'm just like the same guy I've always been. I just have like 20 times more people trusting me for results in their life than I did maybe 60 days ago. And it hits hard, like especially if you're a good coach and you really care, it is a little bit stressful because you almost want to take full accountability for all their results. And that's a huge pitfall because not everyone's going to be successful. Not everyone's going to put the work in. And so imposter syndrome and a lot of anxiety and stress, I noticed for me went hand in hand. Those first few months, I was like, I almost wanted to like shut the whole thing down. I was almost like, this is too much. I don't like how big this has gotten. And I've seen coaches do that. I've seen coaches get to, 50K per month. One of my best clients, she got to 50K per month and she shut it down after that. She like meteoric rise to fame, too much, and she pulled back. And 2 years later, now she's only getting back into it, doing some consistent coaching again. But it was so much imposter syndrome that she was like, I'd rather not have the money and stress than have the money and the imposter syndrome. So no, I can definitely relate. And I think the only thing that allowed me to overcome it was just time. And then also walking the walk myself was like the
Yeah.
more that I kept doing competitions, I kept getting in better shape, I kept doing the things I was telling people to do, the less of an imposter I felt. And it's the same thing for business. It's like I'm very comfortable telling people what to do in their business because I've been doing it for years. Like I was posting daily YouTube videos back in like 2013, like trying to be Max Tuning and Christian Guzman.
Yeah.
And I can just look at people and I could be like, dude, a decade ago, I was daily posting. Like, and it was on an iPhone 4 sideways to YouTube, and I'd have to let it render all night long because it took that long to make these videos and upload them. And so because of that, I was like, that helped me beat the imposter syndrome. So I think if you're a coach and you're struggling with that, is one, keep going. And two, the way it's going to feel better as you keep going is to lean more and more and more into you doing the things you're telling people to do. Um, if you feel like you're telling people to do things you haven't done yet, that's where imposter syndrome gets real because that's the only time it really is real. Other than that, it's just kind of anxiety manifesting itself as something that's not actually there.
Yeah. Yeah. Imposter syndrome really can. I love the way that Alex Ramosi kind of puts it, and I don't know if he was directly referring to, um, imposter syndrome or not, but I think it just applies so beautifully to imposter syndrome. Is you've got to have a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are, and I think if you don't have that stack, that's where the imposter syndrome creeps in because whether you want to admit it to yourself or not subconsciously, if there's a misalignment between who you're telling people you are and who you actually are, like that's where this gap is where imposter syndrome actually grows.
Yeah.
And so you have to be doing the work. You have to be having that, creating that stack of proof. And if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to prove that you are that person, then you're not.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you'll never will be. That's just to say that you're not right now and there's more work to be done.
Yeah. And this is a little niche, but there's an advanced pitfall you can fall into on the other side of this. And it happened to me for a while. And I don't know if anyone's watching this has hit this, but I don't know if anyone's ever spoken on this that I know of. But on the opposite side of imposter syndrome is like hiding in the grass syndrome, which is you become really, really good at this thing and you almost don't want to talk about it because you feel like people are going to call you out. And even though if they called you out, you'd be like, dude, I have more proof than almost anyone else who's saying these things. You're so scared of feeling in that imposter syndrome again that you hide. And I would say for a solid like 2 years when I was starting full-time fit coach, I could look honestly and be like, I have enough social proof with what I've done to like make claims like that are bigger than most of the other claims I'm seeing out there from coaches and stuff. And I didn't. I was like very much like I wouldn't put them out there. I wouldn't talk about that because I was on so the opposite side of it is I never wanted to be perceived as someone who was saying they could do more than they could. And God forbid I would have a client come in who I say something and then I couldn't deliver on,
Yeah.
and because it was one thing for fitness and stuff, but it was a whole other thing for business. I was like, well, what if I can't replicate what I did in their business? And so on the other side of it is get that undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are, and then tell people who you are.
Mhm.
Don't hide behind that, because it goes back to the same thing. People don't know. People can't read your mind. People have no idea you're the best coach in the world. People have no idea you've got hundreds of transformations or successful clients if you don't tell them. And so don't let the people who really are imposters dissuade you from getting your thing out there. And even more importantly, it's all the more important that you do get your stuff out there, because if there are all these people who are saying this stuff and they're really imposters, you owe it to that market. You owe it to those people to put your good
Yes.
stuff out there, and you need to compete and you need to play that game as hard as they're playing it. And even if you feel like they're playing it a little dirty, you have to go out there and you have to play hockey terms. You have to play a little chippy. You have to, go out there and throw some hits,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, you're fighting for your client's future. And if you know that you're the best option for them, don't bow out because you're afraid of being called an imposter. Once you have that stack of undeniable proof, you got to put that everywhere.
Yeah. Man, I love that. I hope you take some clips from this and post them up. You can
I
crop
will.
my face out of it, but you can just the stuff that you're saying, take it and run with it, dude. No, that's awesome. So when you started full time fit coach and you kind of went in, I know there was kind of a period between coaching and then a little bit of another period and then full time fit coach. Whenever you went all in on full time fit coach, what is the differentiator between you and other coaches in the industry?
It's a good question. I think it is the systems. So we're really big on numbers, like we kind of talked about. I
Yep.
don't believe that anyone else does as much tracking as we do. So when someone comes in, one is we have a group level program, but what we really try to get everyone to do is we try to have everyone work one on one. So all of our coaches in full time fit coach are guys who have been through the program and have been running a 6-figure business for at least 2 years. So
Hmm.
you have like a super high criteria for like how you got here. Basically, it's like you had to have learned from full time fit coach to become 6-figure coach. And then you have to have held it for 6 years. And then you have to still run your business while you coach. So you can't quit your coaching business to be a coach for us. You have to also be actively doing it so you can speak to what's working in the market. So we partner anyone who comes in with one of these coaches, and then we really get inside their business. And like I said earlier, those tracking sheets we track content, conversations, calls, and clients. And it works out in such a way that once you start tracking all the metrics we have you do, which it sounds like a lot, but it takes 20 minutes every day to just fill out your numbers, you can look at your goal for the month and you can plug in anything you want. You could say, hey, I want to make like $20,000 cash this month. It will immediately tell you based on your numbers how many clients that represents for your business, what that means you need to do for calls for total for the month, weekly average for the calls. And then it'll even break it down and say, hey, based on how good you are at messaging from the data you've been putting in, this is how many conversations you need to do on a daily basis to make sure you have this number of calls on the calendar. And then it'll go an even step further and it'll say, hey, if you don't want to do cold DMs and you want it all inbound, here's how much content you need to post at your current posting to new followers rate to get enough new followers so you're covering the amount of conversations you want to generate per day. And so it allows us to look really deep into your business. And instead of us just being like, oh, I think you should do this, or, oh, I had a 10K month like a couple of years ago and I started coaching, and back then we did this, so you should do this too. We
Yeah.
look really deep at the numbers and we're like, here's mathematically how you're going to do this. And then here are all the best tactics that we're using right now. And these work for all these coaches who are making 6 figures. So odds are, if you do them the way we tell you, they're going to work for you too. And if they don't, the numbers will tell us where it's broken. And so if you're doing everything right and you're not getting the numbers, we just look into the tracking sheets and it'll be like, oh yeah, you're doing all this, but like 1 in 5 people are showing up. So this week we're just going to do a whole project on like, how do we get more people to show up? And that might be, filling out making a better like pre-call homework section. And so one gives you pure visibility into where you are currently and where you want to go. It tells you everything you have to do. It gives you those daily disciplines. It's like, okay, cool. I want to make 10K this month. This is how many messages and how many posts I have to make. And I can just do them now. I can just do the inputs and not wonder, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? And then if that doesn't deliver the result, we'll know exactly where in this funnel it broke. And so then you can talk to a coach and say, hey, I did everything I said I should, and I only made 7 instead of 10. What do you think's wrong here? We can look at it and say, here's exactly where it's wrong. And here's a project that we've created and we've proven over the last 3 years to work. Let's make this project our next goal. Let's implement it, and then we'll reassess. And it just is as repeatable of a process as you can possibly get with coaching. And like I said, you can't ever guarantee results, but I can guarantee you that it's like we have an answer for nearly any problem that has worked and is if it's stopped working, we take it out. And if there's a new process that works, we plug it in because it's not like we made some money years ago and then we're now just teaching an old methods. Like we just teach exactly what works for six-figure coaches who are still doing it, and we just update it regularly. So I don't know any other coaching programs where it's kind of that mesh of like an active program
Yeah.
and a mixed in with coaches who are actively doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's extremely powerful. And I know a couple of the coaches that you're using, and they're phenomenal resources, phenomenal
Yeah.
guys. And yeah, I think that's so sick. And the combination too of the number side of things combined with access to real people really doing the work every day
Yeah.
is that's awesome.
Yeah.
What are
And then of
your
course we have it built out in AR too. So like they get the whole year's automated for them once we get them
yes.
signed in.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was really trying to bait you in. No, I'm just joking.
I know I
No,
forgot
you
the most
built out
important
a
plug.
yeah, no. We've got an insane snapshot that you've built out for people to use within AR that your people get access to, and it's got your hands, your brain, your systems all over it. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's awesome, and we're seeing some great stuff with that. With your with full time fit coach, what are the goals that you're going towards with that company? Like what are the KPIs that are going to tell you in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years that like you did a good job?
You did a good job. I mean, we have one goal right now, just one heading, which is we want to help 1,000 coaches go full time online.
That's awesome.
That's after that, we'll come up with some more stuff. But I was like, I just have this one heading. I did the math one time and I was like, me as a single coach, I'm like, if I was going to help, 1,000 people go online or, get fit, it'd probably take me 5 or 10 years. And when I started doing business coaching, I asked myself the same question. I was like, if I helped 1,000 coaches go full time, that would represent another 100 clients per person. And we worked out the math where it was like we could help 100,000 people or 1,000,000 people get in shape by helping 1,000 coaches. And I forget what the exact number it was that it works out to eventually, but we decided that if we could help 1,000 coaches go full time online, it would represent something like a million people helped. And so instead of me trying to do it all myself by creating a system and replicating it and making it work. Not only does it give a full-time income to somebody, but it 1,000x's the amount of reach we have for what was originally the goal, which was to help people get healthy, to bring fitness to more people. And so we're just leveraging that online. It's this double-edged sort of like on the one side, you're helping all these people solve their fitness problems. On the other side, you're helping all these coaches solve their financial problems of, a system that's slowly kind of becoming less and less sustainable as a job. I don't think anyone says, "Oh, I'm going to be a personal trainer in my 40s." They're like,
Yeah.
that's not the end goal. And so this is now something where it's like, well, I could be an online personal trainer in my 40s, and I could be living exactly where I want to live, driving what I want to drive, and working the hours I want to work. And so getting more people into this model, it'll help them financially, and it helps the world physically in the way we want it to.
Yeah. I love that. That's a lot of the same discussions that I have around my motivations with starting AR with Mike is it's all about what levers you have access to.
Yeah,
And like you said, I did the math early on of like I can help this many people, and this is kind of my time cap for how many clients I can personally have at a time. But with AR and with what we're doing with AR, it's like now we can help coaches scale. Coaches are able to acquire more clients, and they're able to retain their clients longer. They're able to actually scale and build a bigger business and retain those people longer. So I could pull my fitness coach lever 1-to-1, and then I'm helping X amount of people. I could pull the AR funnel lever, and now, an infinite amount of coaches can join our platform and benefit from the systems that we've built and help an infinite amount of clients. And so it's like that lever allows me to do, again, like just like you were saying, what the goal was at the very beginning, and what all of from the apparel companies to the fitness equipment company to the coaching company to all the things that I've kind of like supplement companies, all the things that I've done up until this point. It's like it's always been around health and fitness.
yeah,
So this is like the biggest lever that I've had access to yet, and I'm a big fan of. It's not always about how hard someone works. Like you could be the hardest working fitness coach in the world, and like the million lives goal, it's attainable, but you're gonna have to like work really, really hard for a really long time. And so getting access to these bigger levers, and a lever can be anyone or anything or any knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so you are a tremendous lever for coaches to be able to use to be able to scale their companies bigger, right? Because it might be something that they could work hard at all the wrong things. And that doesn't mean their company is going to scale as fast as just coming in, having access to you as a lever. And then their company can grow just because they have the systems and knowledge and experience that you have to give them day one. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if
I
that
think
makes sense, but
No, it makes total sense. I think for guys like us too, having both been in fitness for so long, it's like our use value to the industry is better served to the whole by taking these lessons and building levers instead of, trying to, do the individual work ourselves. If we can create larger tools and bigger levers for people to pull,
mhm,
it creates such an exponential impact. And there's not that many people who are going to do it. It takes a long time to get to a point where you understand all the different things that are in the background that would
yeah,
make a company successful. Moving towards like software and solutions and things like this, it's like the natural evolution of, going from the coaching to then helping other people to now being like, what is a tool that I can develop that I can give someone that's going to allow them to 2x, 5x, 10x their ability to create that impact. Um, and then being able to look back at like all these things I've learned, there's a reason why there were failures or there were times where you went through these struggles. It was all building up this knowledge base that you can infuse into something now. And with technology just getting to where it's at, it's like we can infuse this into tools that people can now use, and they can take a decade worth of experience that you and I have, and now they can have it at their fingertips in an instant. So I feel like it's almost like on us to build these things and build them as well as possible and to keep innovating on them, because on a broader scale, it's going to change a whole market versus just us staying in a coaching position, changing a couple lives.
mhm, absolutely. Well, dude, I've had an absolute blast talking to you. Like I said, just getting to pick your big, beautiful brain, and yeah, dude, I appreciate your time. I have one final question for you that
Yeah.
I ask every single guest of the BAMcast. This is the BAMcast, so we're talking about achieving goals by any means necessary. So I want to ask you, Mr. Will, what goal are you going to achieve by any means necessary?
I'm going to help 1,000 coaches become full-time online fitness coaches.
I had a feeling you're going to say that one. I love it. I love it, dude. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I appreciate you hopping on here, man. And I know you're a busy guy, and I see it because we interface so regularly
Yeah.
with our businesses. So I appreciate you taking the time. It's been a blast, man. And we're gonna have to come on as soon as you hit that goal and do a little bit of reflecting on the journey getting there.
Dude, I can't wait. Hopefully it's sooner versus later.
I think it will be. I have no doubts, man. All right,
Thank you for
Will.
having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you.